What do you do?
I train for about 30 to 45 minutes a day. I don't train.
What is it? What kind of training is it?
It depends where I am because I travel so much.
Right.
So if I'm in hotels, you kind of got to do what you can do, right?
Okay.
So mainly it's weights now. I don't box as often because it's inconvenient. Like if I was training for a fight, it's different. Yeah. And I was sparring a couple of days ago. I still got the move. No one can hit me, so I'm still got it. Yeah. But yeah. So usually about 45 minutes, I tear through a bunch of weights. I just go as crazy as I can, get that out of the way. Yeah. Bunch of coffee. I'm a coffee addict, I guess. I don't know if that's still allowed. I hope so. Yeah, but okay, good. Because I love caffeine. I believe caffeine's a miracle drug. So I'll have 2 or 3 coffees, another 2 liters of water. I only eat dinner every day. I don't eat breakfast. I don't eat lunch. Yeah. And then from there, it's just completing tasks. I have something to do. I have a podcast with you to do, or I have somewhere to go, or I have to go. Maybe sometimes it'll be something good, like pick up a new car or new watch. But if not, I promise you now, I spend every waking second on my laptop or staring at my phone running the empire. That's all I do is work. Life to me is work. Life to me is work at the point now, sleeping's work. I only sleep because if I don't sleep, I wouldn't be able to work. Wow. If I could work without sleeping, I wouldn't sleep. People look at my life and they, especially you're right, with the marketing, they see the cars, they see the boats, they see girls, etc. And they're like, oh, wow, he's living this crazy life. And then they get around me and realize that, yeah, we're on a boat. Yeah, there's hot girls. Yeah, it's a yacht. But I'm on my laptop and I'm working. That's it. That's all I want to do is run the empire because it gives me a sense of purpose. So it sounds boring to say, but all I do is work, my friend. That's it. Wow. That's it. When I finish this, we'll talk, we'll have a bit of food, etc. I'll get in the car, I'll go back, and I will work until my next appointment. That's it. I just work. That's all I do. So it's kind of funny because people say to me like, "What's the secret to getting rich?" And I'm like, "It's easy if you don't do anything else but work." Like I don't have any. My only like I'm trying to think of what even hobby I have. I love to drive.
What is the secret of getting rich?
That's a good question. That's a good question. We live in an attention economy, so I think stage 1 is certainly attention. Stage 2 is once you have that attention, establishing credibility. And then stage 3, once you've established the credibility, is finding a way to genuinely improve people's lives. The reason I do so fantastically well is because everybody who's ever followed me or tried any of the things I talk about, their life gets better. So it's very easy to say, oh, I've tried Tate's program and my life's better, or I tried this, I followed Tate and I feel happier. So then, of course, they're going to understand the brand, and that's the way to do it. But truly, it's hard work. You need to be able to work endless hours. It's extremely competitive. You need to be able to work as harder than the other guys, and that's the only way I did it. I ground to the top the old-fashioned way, and that's still what I do. I just work.
So with this, basically, you'll say that, in terms of your routine, Islamically, the main thing to focus next on will be the prayers, 5 prayers a day, right? And so that's obviously 1 in the morning, and then you'll have like prayer times and stuff like that, where you have to do the ablution and learn to. I saw you kind of praying. That was
I'm learning it, and and I've been told the times, and I've got all this, and I'm going through all that, and I have to incorporate that as well.
It gives you a solid structure. I feel like it gives you anchorage in the day. It's the spine of my personal day. I feel like it just creates that structure in the day. And it's a spiritual thing. I mean, even the prayer itself, when one prays and they say Allahu Akbar, which is Allah is the greatest. Some people think it's some kind of war chant. They do it in war as well, I mean, to be fair. But they say Allahu Akbar, meaning Allah is greater than everything else, this whole world and everything in it. And then when they start engaging in prayer, then what you're doing is you're trying to, in a sense, get out of the zone of being in this world, connect with God, ask God for guidance. And we do that very consistently because we feel like, the belief is that guidance is in God's hands, and so doing that, spiritually cleansing, for me, it's the most important thing that one can do in the whole day. So that, in terms of your structure, that would be the thing that you'd put in next. But I wanted to ask you about something else now, which I think is something you're known for as well, in terms of speaking about these things, is your gender positions, okay? So this is, a lot of people have controversy with you, accuse you of misogyny and all these kinds of things. I mean, let's say now, maybe after you've become Muslim or even before, what are your views on gender? Like, how would you summarize your views on gender?
I would summarize my views on gender by being very simple and stating the fact that I think that the genders are different. I think we have different strengths and weaknesses. I think men are better at some things than women. I think women are better at some things than men. I think when we work together as a team, that makes us the most powerful force on the planet. I think the biggest problems with the world today is that everybody is trying to pretend that they're interchangeably as good as each other at the same things, and that's destroying the teamwork. It's very simple. If I was an accountant and I met a tailor, I'd say, okay, you make the clothes, I'll do the accounting. And then as a team, we have a very profitable business, right?
Yeah.
If we were to turn up and we were to decide, you know what, I'll do half the accounting and you do half the accounting, and you do half the tailors and I do half the tailors, where our tax bill will be a mess, the jackets won't fit, like it'll all fall apart. I don't know why it's so confusing for people to sit there and understand and go, yeah, women have certain strengths and weaknesses, men have certain strengths and weaknesses, and when we both understand them, both accept them, and work as a team, then we're a complete package, and this is why God created us to be different. Absolutely. If we were exactly the same, we wouldn't need each other. This is what makes us need each other.
That's a powerful statement.
This is why we need each other.
We wouldn't need each other.
That's right, and this is what people don't understand when they sound misogynistic or I say bad things. I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'm talking about the differences between men and women so people understand that men need women, and women need men. And that's what creates beautiful families. That's what keeps society functioning. And as soon as you point out the differences between the two genders, they're going to attack you because they don't want men and women to need each other. That's one of the things they really don't want, because the number one thing that will inspire you to resist against total tyranny is protection of your family. They don't want the family unit in terms of the nuclear family, because otherwise when they come to your door, the devils and the demons, you're going to stand up and say, no, my wife and children are inside. They don't want that. They want you to just be hedonistic and not really have anything of value and nothing worth fighting for and defending, because then you'll accept the slave programming and accept whatever they want you to do. But yeah, my views on gender are very, very simple. I think that we're slightly different, but together we're ultimately powerful. And pointing that out has somehow labeled me negative by this vocal minority of psychopaths. And it truly, and I say psychopaths because they truly are. They're psychopaths, these people. They're truly destructive. And when I look at the people who have the most hate for me, who say I'm the most detrimental to women, if I look at their lives, none of them are happily married. A lot of them aren't even into women. They swing a completely different direction. Like, these people, why are you pretending you care about a masculine man's views on females? Why do you pretend you care when I say I want to protect and provide for my woman? If she doesn't want to work, she doesn't have to work. I'll take care of her in that way, and she'll take care of me in another way. Why are you pretending that offends you when your relationship with women in your own personal life doesn't even exist? And if it does, it's awful.
I'll tell you what's going to happen now. As we're agreeing and talking now, some people, especially some feminist people that are influenced by feminism within the Muslim community, say, look, this is exactly what we feared. He's not holding him to account. He's not speaking to him about the wild statements. The truth is, I'll say this: I don't actually feel like I need to judge you, because, quite frankly, Allah has already wiped away your sins. Any statement that you made before about women, or anything that you've done with women before, once again, it's not my business to judge you upon that. So that should be the Islamic position. However, let's say for the wider community, right? Because at the end of the day, we do want you to kind of not reintegrate, especially not in the matrix. Now, alhamdulillah, you're out of the matrix, let's say, fully out of it. Islam is totally out of the matrix. That's why they hate it so much. Some of the comments that you've made, I haven't got a list of them. What are some of the comments that they accuse you of making, and what is the context of these comments? So
the two that they accuse me of most is where I said a woman is a man's property, which is the first one. And the second one that they try and get me with is where I said a woman should bear some responsibility for being sexually assaulted. Both of them are massively taken out of context. And I'd like to explain them. When I said about a woman being a man's property, I was talking about the idea of biblical marriage at the time, Christian marriage. I was saying that the man walks, the father walks the bride down the aisle, gives her to the groom, she takes his last name, and he is now responsible for protecting and providing for her till death do them part. She joins his family, right? She belongs to him. Oh no, so you're saying she's property? I'm saying she belongs to him.
All right, so it's a semantic issue.
It's a semantic issue, correct?
So you're not necessarily saying that he can buy and sell her.
Absolutely not. I'm saying that he is responsible for her, and he must protect and provide for her. That's this one. But I never even said the word property. They said the word property at me.
Really?
Right? So I said that she belongs to him.
Because the exchange I saw is between you and Piers Morgan. And he was just being obnoxious. I don't even know how. You can see the man was insecure. That's how I psychoanalyze him. I'm not, a psychiatrist, but I think he's just insecure. He felt like he had something to prove. He was, he's of a certain age, a certain weight, a certain disposition, and there's people, when they see you and him together, that's enough of a victory for you and enough of a loss for him, just to see you two, side by side. But as his face was becoming red like Peppa Pig, and he was getting more and more angry and interjecting every second, he was mentioning these points. This is the only thing that, from my perspective, I felt, okay, maybe he has a point here. But as you've explained it, if you mean by property X, Y, and Z, but you don't actually mean property, then potentially we say, look, this is not the best wording.
Yeah.
It's not the best wording.
Absolutely.
And what you didn't mean by that is, she's some kind of commodity and object.
Correct. Absolutely not. In fact, quite the opposite. I was trying to say how important she is and how she must be protected and provided for. Okay. And it was taken completely out of context and weaponized against me. And it's very similar with the other comment of how women should bear some personal responsibility for being sexually assaulted. I'm not saying in 100% of cases that sexual assault couldn't have been prevented. I'm not saying sexual assault should happen. In fact, I'd argue that I'm more strict on the idea of rape than the laws. I think these people should be executed. I think it's disgusting, completely and utterly disgusting. However, I think it is asinine for us as a society to sit here and pretend that if a woman goes out, takes drugs with a man she doesn't know, goes to his house without telling her brother or her father or telling anybody, and puts herself in a position of absolute vulnerability, that she has zero responsibility. So I'm not, it shouldn't happen to her. Of course. It's disgusting. Yeah, but also, I shouldn't get robbed if I walk down the street with $1 million in the middle of the night. So but it can. So I must think ahead.
What you're effectively saying is that, if there are certain situations where the probability of sexual assault for women increase. In fact, for example, the WHO itself, I was looking at, they had this whole, probably the most compendious thing on rape and sexual assault, and they were talking about different countries, and the one thing that they said, which the West has more than other places, is stranger rape. And actually, one of the reasons why could very well be because of this culture of intoxications, of clubbing and these kinds of things. So it increases the probability. I think it's a very reasonable argument to say, well, this increases the possibility of stranger rape. Now, obviously, they're going to come back and say, but the way you said it,
of course they're going to do it.
It's victim blaming.
But they're going to say it's victim blaming, and they're saying I'm going to be advocating for rape, and they're going to be saying I said it's okay, which is all garbage. It's all nonsense. Yeah. I'm trying to explain to people in a very realistic fashion that we live in a world which is not ideal. We live in a world where everybody understands that stealing is wrong, but some people still steal. This is why we lock our cars and lock our houses. Absolutely. This is why we protect our certain assets and our money. This is why I will not walk down the street with a gold watch in London at 3 in the morning by myself, because I don't want to put myself in a position where there's a higher probability of something bad happening to me. Yeah. And I'm just saying that when it comes to this one particular crime, because it's so heinous, and it is heinous, absolutely, and certainly every perpetrator should face the absolute full punishment from not only the law, but God himself. But they sit and pretend that there's zero personal responsibility involved. And I'm just saying that there are some scenarios, not all, but in some scenarios, the woman has made it so easy for something bad to happen to her. And I'm saying we should teach them not to do that so that we can protect them. And the reason this whole subject came up is because I was talking about if I'm a man and I'm responsible for my woman and I want to protect her, and somehow we got on the subject of rape, and this was on a podcast 3 or 4 years ago. I said, the number one way I can protect my woman besides being beside her is teaching her to make smart decisions when I'm not around and making sure she's smart and doesn't put herself in bad positions. And this feminist was saying, yeah, but people shouldn't rape. I was like, I agree. People shouldn't steal. People shouldn't do a lot of things, but you still have to protect yourself and have some personal responsibility. And the feminist's argument against it was that, no, we need to teach men not to rape. Some asinine, idealistic, fairy tale land where we're going to go around and convince every man on earth to never rape again. As if we haven't been trying to convince people not to steal since the dawn of human time. It's stupid.
I think at the base of what you're saying is basically a concern that, look, if you follow this advice, you'll get the best results. It's very, very pragmatic advice.
Absolutely.
But what is being twisted as actually this guy is a misogynist, which, by the way, the definition of they haven't even agreed on.
Correct.
And this guy believes X, Y, and Z, and they're taking you out of context. The problem here is, for example, with rape, actually, interestingly, I was speaking to a lawyer. I'm not sure if the case is still the case in the UK, but I don't think you can actually be convicted of rape if you're a woman to a man. I think only a woman can be convicted.
Which is funny enough. Another thing that was interesting when I was arguing this point, I was arguing it saying, listen, you've made this a gendered argument because you're a feminist. 29% of rape cases in UK are male on male. And I'll say the same thing to a man. Don't go, do drugs, become intoxicated, go back home with someone you don't know, and put yourself in a position to be raped, stabbed, killed, murdered, whatever it is, right? And the feminists who were arguing against me goes, oh, but you don't understand male privilege. You get to walk around safe at night without worry. I was like, listen, my dear, you have no idea what it is to be a man. You have no idea. You think we walk around London in the middle of the night willy-nilly with no concerns? They will kill us for the piece of metal on our wrist. Like, you think we're just walking around thinking doop-de-doo? No. Absolutely not. Yeah. I'd actually argue that in certain scenarios, in certain places in the Western world, it's more dangerous to walk alone as a man than a woman. Yeah. You know, so it's absolutely asinine. They have this idealistic worldview that everything's perfect for men and everything's men's fault, and women have no personal responsibility. And no matter what a woman does, there's no way she could be possibly involved, even 1% her fault at all.
Yeah, but and on this point of the legalistic distinction, for example, if a woman cannot rape a man, but she can sexually assault him, but she cannot, quote unquote, rape him, for example, UK law, why are the feminists not arguing for equal rights on this point?
Because feminists don't want equal rights.
Yeah, it's not equal rights. It's what we want is we want entitlement. It's an entitlement scheme. But the point is, really, I think you are a proponent of traditional family, aren't you?
Absolutely.
At the heart of it, you've always said that, despite everything else.
Absolutely. I'm a proponent of traditional family, and I'm a proponent of
polygamy as well?
Yeah, well, I'm a proponent of traditional roles. Yeah. And the reason for this is because I actually think it makes humanity the most competitive. Yeah. I think that the world functions best and we're the most competitive as a species the closer we are to our original natural gender roles. And I think if you were to take 10 men and 10 women, yes. Let's say we have 2 planes, right? Both have 10 men, 10 women, both crash on an island. And if you had 10 men and 10 women who fell into their gender roles, and the women started, foraging, and the men started hunting and building, and the women, made blankets, and the men found animals to kill, and we fell into our gender roles. And then you have the other island where all 10 of them, it's all mixed up and everyone just does whatever they decide. And not, I don't have to do that because I'm a man, you do it, etc. I feel like the island where people fall to their gender roles are more likely to succeed. I think if you go I think if you go to societies where life is much more difficult than it is for us because we live blessed lives, they are very, very ingrained to their gender roles because they understand the only way they can survive as a tribe or a species is for the men to do X and the women to do X. We both do what we're good at, and this makes us the most competitive. And I feel like if you want to have a stable society and a competitive society, and when I say competitive, I mean competitive in all realms, including safety, including having as many children as possible, not even competitive in a combative sense. I'm just talking about having enough kids to beat the reproduction rate, which we're failing to do in the West, and everyone being able to walk around without getting hurt. I think the way to do that is to be inside of our gender roles. I think that's the way it is. And I grew up in a place where the world was very different. I'm not even that old. I was 35, but I grew up in a completely different world. Like if a random man, a stranger, a neighbor, yelled at me as a kid, my dad would be like, yeah, yell at him. Like we were scared of our elders. Like my dad went to work, my mom cooked and cleaned, and looked after us kids. Like I grew up in that world. And people now are just trying to completely throw it out the window, and they seem surprised that society's falling apart in front of our very eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a verse in the Quran that actually says something quite similar to what you're saying. It says, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Do not wish what the other one has. لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ. For a man is a portion from what he has earned, and for a woman is a portion from what she has earned. And وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, and ask God from His bounty, meaning do not attempt to encroach on the other person's role. Yep. Like men have been given certain things that women have not been given, and vice versa. Yep. And it's interesting that you talk about this case study example of islands, because quite frankly, I was looking at some statistics, and from the 1960s, where the second wave feminist movement became very widespread, until now, there's been studies that have been done. The biggest one is one called Blanche Flower and Oswald, which happened between the years 1970 to 1990. It was a longitudinal study. And you'd expect that after all the implementation of legislative change and stuff like that in America and the UK and elsewhere in the West, that women will be having a better life and that they'll be enjoying their times. But the conclusion of the study, after they've interviewed 100,000 women, this is the biggest study that I think has ever been done, 100,000 women, in both the UK and the US. The conclusion was that women have a deteriorated situation. And in fact, even like the heads or the mothers of second wave feminism, like Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, and others, even Germaine Greer, in 1963 she wrote the book Feminine Mystique, and then afterwards she wrote another book which people don't study in schools. She said it herself. Wow. She wrote a book called The Second Stage. She said, I'd done sociological experiments in the 70s, after the 60s, after the change that had been done in the 60s, and I found that in the 70s, women were more depressed. Yep. 1/3 of women, she states this in her own book, she says that 1/3 of women were worse off. It was really interesting. There was actually a magazine, very famous magazine, that done a poll on women. And they said, it's called Top Satre magazine. And they found that 79% of women that responded said that they would quit work if they could tomorrow. 80% said that work is causing them psychological pain and distress. So in other words, this whole idea of prioritizing careers over motherhood and over being a wife and stuff like that, the experiment has already been done in a sense. Absolutely. And it's been done for the last 61 years, or 62 years, let's say, since 63. And in that time, what we found has been a tremendous failure. Of course. Which has impacted women's mental health, their physical health, it's impacted families. One more thing I will say is that I was talking to one guy who's he's done demographic stuff called Nicholas Wolfinger. And I asked him what families are most stable or whatever, by way of the children turn out to be most educated, and they're away from delinquency and criminality, these kinds of statistics. He actually said religious families, obviously nuclear, traditional families, religious families. So we have the data to show that families that take this traditional role are clearly advantaged. They advantage women, they advantage children, they advantage men. Absolutely. So it is the model. And now you're saying something which is against it. Clearly it's not in their economic interest. And so is it the case that because of this they're canceling you? Yeah, I think it's because I'm trying to stick up for the baseline morality of humanity. It's interesting what you just said earlier as well from the Islamic point of view, that we're born with an innate good and an innate understanding. I think that women innately, maybe the world has convinced them otherwise, but from my experiences, the only thing that satisfies them is becoming a mother. And nothing else is going to fill that hole in your heart. No amount of Sex in the City, Starbucks, makeup, Instagram likes, career, all this crap. There's a reason you are sad. And the reason you are sad is because you should have been a mother 8 years ago. And this is why you feel miserable inside. And this is something that females are born innately with, and society is trying to convince it out of them. And that's why you have so much confusion in the world today. And like you said, this is why they ended up being less happy after this liberation than they were before. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't have free choice. I think women should absolutely be allowed to do whatever they want. But they should sit and understand that the matrix and the system, the propaganda machine that they're sitting and digesting is trying very hard to convince them to move away from their natural instincts. When you sit and watch Sex in the City about some 49-year-old woman with no kids who's having a great time and is 0% depressed on her 58th fucking dude that month, and you're sitting there watching it, they are trying to program you. And most women don't realize the level of propaganda they're existing under. This also goes back to the earlier point I made about Trojan horses. Because this is how they do everything. Feminism was about give the women the vote, right? Then they sneak in all this other insanity. Let's not allow women to have kids. Let's try and convince them not to. Let's convince women not to respect their man and make him feel like a man in his own household. Let's convince women that they can physically attack a man on the street and they have no disadvantage at all because they're just as strong as a man is. Let's convince the women of this insanity, but we'll Trojan horse it in with feminism. So if you say, well, I'm against feminism. Oh, you don't want women to vote? No. It's the same thing they did with the Green New Deal, right? We want to save the planet and sneak the money in. So you have to also understand, and I wish people were more perspicacious that could understand that any agenda that the mainstream media is purporting, any agenda they're trying to make you swallow, there are hidden agendas and hidden back doors in all of it. There always will be. And it doesn't matter whether it's passport for a particular injection. It doesn't matter if it's ideology. It doesn't matter what it is. They're trying to give you the surface level understanding that you can't disagree with, so that all the things you don't like come in, right? And that's the scary thing about feminism. A lot of it is just a simple explanation that it's in the economic interest of the West and the elites. And it's no coincidence that second wave feminism really took off after World War II, where the infrastructure of these countries was damaged, and these guys were bringing immigrants from all these countries now. That's why we've got so many immigrants and so-called immigrants, people from abroad, ex-colonies or whatever, in the UK or whatever it is. They needed women in the workforce, so this was a convenient ideology, but which has now taken a Frankenstein form, and which has endangered women, endangered children, put women and children both in a very bad predicament. You're saying something opposite to this. They're saying if this guy gets too popular, we're going to lose money. Oh, completely. And it's not even just lose money. I think it's more sinister than that. I think they're going to lose influence, and influence is the #1 thing they care about. The reason that they push feminism so hard, a lot of people understand, is so they could double the tax bracket. They wanted women to work so they could double the taxes. But I think the other reason they did it that a lot of people don't consider is that in the modern world, in the world you live in today, in the West,
you don't raise your children and you don't own your children. You've had these children, I like to believe, because you're in love with your partner and you want to replicate yourself and purport your worldviews. And the way you view the world, you want that to be instilled in this child. That's not the case. They wanted the woman at work, because if the woman's at home, she likely agrees with the worldviews of her man, and that means the children are being raised by the mother, and they're likely to adopt those worldviews. In the modern world, where they convince a woman to get a job, the man to get a job, they inflate the currency so nobody can exist any other way because it's too expensive. The parents are out working all day. The school and the internet and the matrix raise your children. Your children go to school all day and be told things that you may not want them to learn. Then they sit on the internet and read things and watch things you may not want them to watch. You talk to them for 10 minutes at the end of the day and they go to bed. You're fighting with your 10 minutes against endless hours of the most entertaining programming or the most forceful programming. In school, it's forceful.